It started in the most forgettable way. I'd gone downstairs because the faucet in the upstairs room, my room, wouldn't stop dripping. It was late morning, one of those gray days where light just hangs. She was at the kitchen table, a half-empty mug beside her, laptop open but untouched. I cleared my throat like someone announcing themselves in a stranger's house, even though I'd been living there 3 months. "The faucet's leaking again," I said. She looked up, eyes narrowing a little like she was pulling herself out of a dream. "The one in your bathroom?" I nodded. She shut the laptop, slid the mug aside. "I'll take a look." I offered to fix it myself. She shook her head, already reaching for the small toolkit she kept under the sink. Something about that gesture, the casual way she crouched down, rummaging like she'd done this 100 times, stuck with me. She wasn't delicate about it, but not careless either. Just practiced. I followed her upstairs, more out of politeness than need. The sound of dripping grew louder, like the faucet was trying to call her attention. She twisted the handles, tested the spout, pressed her palm against the metal like it could tell her its secrets. I stood in the doorway, useless, shifting my weight from one foot to the other. "You keep staring like that, I'll start charging extra," she said without looking at me. I laughed, caught off guard. "Sorry. I didn't expect you to know your way around tools." Her mouth tugged into a half-smile. "Life teaches you things when it wants to, not when you ask." The way she said it, light, almost careless, made me curious. I wanted to ask more, but I didn't. She tightened something with a wrench, leaned back, and the dripping stopped. The silence that followed felt heavy, almost too loud. "There," she said, brushing her hands on her jeans. "Simple repair." But the image stayed with me. Her focused hands, the way her hair slipped forward when she bent down, how she didn't fill silence with words the way most people did. We lingered in the bathroom longer than needed. I leaned against the doorframe, folding the edge of my sleeve between my fingers. She glanced at me once, quickly, then back at the faucet as if it still required her. "You're quiet," she said. I shrugged. "Guess I'm used to it." That made her look at me differently. Not pity, not judgment, just noticing, like she'd marked something down in her head and decided not to say more. Later, in the kitchen, she poured herself another cup of coffee. Without asking, she filled a second mug and slid it toward me. I'd never told her I liked mine black, no sugar, no cream. But it was. She knew. "You remember things," I said. She tilted her head. "Doesn't everyone?" I wanted to answer, but I just wrapped my hands around the mug and let the heat sit there. The rest of the day passed in small fragments. Her typing at the table, me pretending to study upstairs, the faint clink of her spoon against porcelain drifting through the floorboards. But every time I turned on the bathroom sink and heard only silence, I thought of her kneeling there, fixing something for me like it was nothing at all. That night, when I finally checked my phone before bed, I saw a new message. Short, plain. "If it leaks again, don't wait 3 days to tell me." I read it twice, then a third time. There was nothing unusual about it. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't really about the faucet at all. The next few days blurred into a rhythm. Classes, work shifts, evenings spent half studying at the desk upstairs. I'd hear her moving around below, doors opening, cupboard doors closing, the scrape of a chair across the floor. Ordinary sounds, but they drew my attention the way a faint song does when you're trying not to hum along. One evening, I came down for tea. I told myself it was just for the kettle, but really, I wanted to be where she was. She sat at the kitchen table again, reading glasses sliding down her nose, a paperback propped open with one hand. "You're a night owl," I said, pulling 2 mugs from the cupboard. She looked up. "And you're not a tea drinker." "I'm trying to be," I said, setting the bag into the cup. "Healthy habit or something." Her lips curved, not quite a smile. "You're 23. You don't need habits yet." The way she said it, like she was both amused and faintly wistful, made me bold. "And you?" She tapped the spine of her book with her finger. 46. Habits are all I have. There it was. The number hung between us. I knew, of course, but hearing her say it out loud was different. It underlined everything I'd been half ignoring, that she could have been my teacher, or worse, my mom's friend. that I shouldn't even notice the way her hair caught the light, or how the veins on her hands stood out delicate but steady when she poured hot water. I sat across from her, the steam rising between us. For a long time we didn't talk, just listened to the whistle of the kettle fading and the tick of the clock on the wall. She broke it first. "I hate that faucet." I laughed. "It hates me too." That small exchange loosened something. We talked in pieces, her about the house, how she'd bought it with her husband before he passed, how it felt both too big and too small now. I didn't know what to say, so I just listened, tracing circles on the side of my mug. At one point, she caught me looking at her. Not her face, exactly, her hands. She noticed. She always noticed. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," I said quickly. You remind me of my aunt. She used to fix everything in her house too. Never waited for anyone." Her expression softened. "That's not the worst comparison." Silence again, but this time warmer. The kind of quiet that doesn't itch. Still, the guilt came in waves. I imagined how this might look from the outside. A young tenant hanging around his older landlady, inventing excuses for tea. It felt childish, dangerous even, though nothing had happened. Nothing would happen. At least, that's what I told myself. She closed her book after a while, set it on the table, and leaned back. "You're supposed to be upstairs, aren't you? Studying." "Supposed to be," I admitted. "You'll regret it if you don't." "I already regret plenty of things." The words slipped out before I could pull them back. Her gaze sharpened, curious, but she didn't press. Just let the lines sit there between us, like something fragile we weren't ready to touch. I finished my tea slowly, dragging it out longer than necessary. She fiddled with her glasses, set them down, then glanced at me with an expression I couldn't read, half stern, half something else. When I finally stood to leave, she reached across the table to take my empty mug. Our hands brushed. Barely. It was nothing. An accident. But the warmth of it lingered all the way upstairs. Later, lying awake, I kept replaying that moment. The sound of porcelain against her palm, the fleeting contact, the way she didn't pull back too quickly. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. It was raining the night it almost tipped. Not the kind of rain you plan around. Just steady enough to keep the streets empty, steady enough that I heard every drop against the windows upstairs. I went down for tea again, though really it was just an excuse. She was in the kitchen, lights dim, sweater sleeves pushed up, drying dishes with the hem of a towel. "You'll spoil your study schedule," she said without turning. I wasn't getting anywhere anyway. I set the kettle on. For a moment, it was just the hiss of water and the rain filling in the space. I wanted to tell her I liked this, being in the same room, not needing to say much. But words stuck. She finally looked up, and something in her face, tired maybe, or softer than usual, made me sit down. "Long day?" I asked. She shrugged. "They all blur." Then she paused, as if catching herself. "Sorry, you don't need to hear that." But I did. I wanted to. Before I could say so, the back door rattled. A neighbor's voice called her name, muffled through the rain. She stiffened, glanced at me, then back at the door. "Stay," she mouthed quietly, then went out to answer. I sat frozen, listening to her laugh. Lighter, brighter, the way you laugh when you're watched. My chest tightened. By the time she came back in, shaking rain off her hair, the room felt different. "You should head up," she said gently. I nodded, but didn't move. "I don't want to be a bother." "You're not." She set the towel down, smoothing it flat with her hand. "It's just, people talk." The words landed heavy. People talk. Of course they do. Landlady. Tenant. 46. 23. I stared at my mug like it could give me an answer. "Right," I said. "Sorry." She exhaled, slow, like she hated the silence she'd made. "Don't be." Something in her tone pulled me back. I stood, close enough that I could see the small lines around her eyes, the way her breath caught just a little. For a second, neither of us moved. My hand twitched, almost reaching for hers on the counter. Almost. But she shifted first, stepping back, brushing past me to hang the towel. It was small, ordinary, but it said everything. Not yet, not here. I left before I made it harder. Upstairs, the rain was louder, or maybe it was just me listening harder. My pulse was still caught in the space between what almost happened and what didn't. We hadn't crossed any line. But I knew, sooner or later, we might. It happened on a Sunday evening, the kind where daylight drags its feet and the air smells faintly of wet leaves. I'd gone out for a walk to clear my head, headphones in, but nothing playing. Halfway down the block, I saw her ahead, coat unbuttoned, scarf loose around her neck, walking slower than she needed to. I almost turned back. Almost. But my feet carried me forward. "You following me now?" she said without looking, her voice carrying the faintest trace of amusement. "Maybe." She slowed so I could catch up. We walked side by side, no destination in mind, just the crunch of damp gravel underfoot. "After a while," she said, "you should be with your friends. Not wasting time with someone like me." "Someone like you?" I repeated. Her mouth tightened. "Old. Complicated. Not what you need." The words stung, though she hadn't meant them to. I shoved my hands in my pockets. "You don't know what I need." That made her glance at me. Quick, searching. Then she looked away again, pulling her scarf tighter. We reached a small park, empty except for a bench slick with rain. She brushed the seat with her sleeve and sat. I hesitated before joining her. The silence between us stretched, broken only by the hiss of passing cars in the distance. "Finally," she said, "you should know. I notice things. The way you linger. The way you look at me." Heat rushed to my face. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," she said quickly, then softer. "That's what scares me." I turned toward her. She was staring at the ground, hands knotted in her lap. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain, unguarded. "You think I don't feel it too?" she whispered. The words dropped like stones in my chest. I opened my mouth, closed it again. My pulse was loud, almost embarrassing. "You're right," I said finally, voice low. "I linger. I look. I can't help it." Her shoulders slumped, as if hearing it out loud made it both real and unbearable. "And what would people say? What would you say 5 years from now, when you've moved on, and I'm just a story you don't tell?" The question hung in the air, sharp and raw. I wanted to promise her everything, to tell her she wouldn't be a regret, not a secret. But I couldn't. I didn't know the future any more than she did. So I said the only honest thing I could. "I don't think about 5 years from now. I think about right now." She looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes glossy in the dim light, her breath visible in the cool air. For a moment, I thought she might close the space between us. I leaned forward, just slightly, like gravity had decided for me. Her hand lifted halfway, then stopped, hovering. She let out a shaky laugh. "This is foolish." "Yeah," I breathed. "It is." Neither of us moved. The distance was small enough that I could see the faint scar near her temple, the tiny tremor in her fingers. The silence grew heavy, pressing. I almost asked. I almost leaned. "Instead," she whispered, "what do you really want from me?" And there it was, the unspoken question that had been circling us for weeks. I didn't answer. Couldn't. My throat closed around the words. The rain started again, soft at first, like it wanted to cover for us. The next morning, the air in the house felt different. Not heavy, exactly, just careful. I went downstairs expecting to see her at the kitchen table, same as always. But the table was empty, the mug washed and drying on the rack, her chair tucked neatly in. I didn't see her all day. At first, I told myself it was nothing. She'd gone out, errands maybe. But by evening, the silence pressed in. No sound of typing below, no kettle boiling, no faint hum of the radio she sometimes left on. I stayed in my room, pacing, wondering if I'd done something wrong. When I finally caught her the next night, she was coming in the door, grocery bag slung over her shoulder. She startled when she saw me waiting at the bottom of the stairs. "Oh," she said. Then quickly, "Late class." "Yeah. You okay?" "Of course." Too quick. She brushed past, dropped the bag on the counter, and began unloading things with unnecessary precision. Apples lined in a row, bread tucked into the bread box, a carton of milk adjusted twice before she let it go. I hovered. Did I? No. She cut me off, her voice sharper than she meant. Then softer. "No, you didn't." But she wouldn't meet my eyes. That week, her habits shifted. She stopped lingering in the kitchen, stopped making extra tea. The chair at the table stayed pushed in, like she was trying to erase the idea of us sitting there together. Once, I heard her laugh, on the phone with someone, a sound brighter than anything she'd given me. I pressed my ear against the floorboards, then hated myself for it. Days stretched like that. I went down only when necessary, catching glimpses of her in passing. She was always in motion now, keys in hand, bag on her shoulder, jacket already zipped, as if standing still near me had become dangerous. Then came the night I found the photo. I'd gone into the laundry room for a clean shirt. On the shelf above the dryer sat a small box, its lid half open. Inside, old pictures. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. There she was, younger, hair longer, arm looped through a man's. Her husband, I guessed. And in another photo, someone else. A girl. 17, maybe 18. Their resemblance, undeniable. Her daughter. I froze, shirt clutched in my hands. It explained things I hadn't asked about. Why she pulled back when I lingered too long. Why she looked at me like I was both near and far at once. I wasn't just her tenant. I was the age her daughter might have been when that photo was taken. I set the picture down carefully, closing the lid as if that could undo the trespass. Upstairs, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my phone in my hand. I typed out a message. I didn't mean to make this harder for you, but couldn't bring myself to send it. The next morning, her chair was back at the table. Mug beside her, steam curling into the air. She didn't look up when I came down. Coffee's fresh, she said, too casually. I poured myself a cup, sat across from her like always. We didn't speak. The ticking clock filled in the gaps. I wanted to ask if she was pulling away because of him, or because of her daughter, or because she'd felt that moment on the bench as sharply as I had. I wanted to ask if she thought about it still, but the words stayed in my throat. When I left for class, I paused at the door, hand hovering over the knob. I almost turned back, almost said something. Instead, I walked out, leaving her bent over her mug, unreadable. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence that IT was late, almost midnight, when the moment came. I'd been at the library longer than usual, pretending to study. By the time I got back, the house was dark except for a faint light in the kitchen. She was there, elbows on the table, mug untouched in front of her. No book, no laptop, no distractions, just her and the low hum of the fridge. I hesitated in the doorway. Couldn't sleep? Her head lifted slowly. Not really. I stepped inside, letting my bag drop by the wall. Me neither. The silence that followed wasn't like before. It wasn't easy, wasn't warm. It was heavy, brittle, like one wrong word might shatter it. She broke it first. I shouldn't have pulled away. My chest tightened. I leaned against the counter, afraid to move closer. You did what you thought you had to. Her fingers traced the rim of her mug. You're young. You have a whole life waiting. And she trailed off, shaking her head. I've already lived mine. That's not how it feels, I said quietly. She looked at me then, really looked, as if measuring whether I meant it. You think this is simple? No, I admitted. But it's real. The clock on the wall ticked. She pressed her lips together, the lines around her mouth deepening. When I was your age, I thought real was enough. Then life corrected me. I swallowed hard. You think I'll regret this? I know you will, she said, almost a whisper. Then softer. And I can't afford another regret. Her words hit like stones, but beneath them, I heard something else. Fear, not rejection. I took a step forward, then another, until I was close enough to see the faint shadows under her eyes. I found the photos, I said, careful, as if confessing a crime. Your husband. Your daughter. Her breath caught. She sat back in her chair. You shouldn't have. I know, I cut in. I'm sorry. I needed to understand. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, she's 20 now, studying abroad. Sometimes I think if she walked in right now and saw this, saw us, she'd never forgive me. Us. She said it like it existed, even if only in the space between sentences. I lowered myself into the chair across from her. My hands gripped my knees under the table, trying to ground myself. I don't care what people think, I said. Not the neighbors. Not your daughter. Not anyone. She closed her eyes briefly, as if the words were too much. When she opened them again, They were glassy. But I do. That was the truth. The wall I couldn't break. Still, I leaned in, voice low. Then tell me to stop. Tell me this means nothing. I'll go upstairs, and we'll never talk about it again. Her hand trembled against the mug. For a moment, I thought she might say it. I almost wanted her to, just to end the ache. But she didn't. Instead, she reached across the table, fingers brushing mine. Not a grab. Not a claim. Just a touch, light as breath. I can't tell you that, she said. I exhaled shakily, my hand turning just enough to meet hers. Warm. Real. We sat there in silence, hands barely joined, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down but not breaking us. Finally, she gave the smallest smile. Tired, uncertain, but there. Okay, she whispered. And somehow, it was enough. Months passed. Not all at once, but in small pieces, the kind you only notice when you pause long enough to count them. At first, nothing dramatic shifted. We still lived upstairs and downstairs, still met in the kitchen at odd hours, still kept our silences like a shared secret. But slowly, the gaps closed. She stopped pulling away when I came in. The mugs began to appear in twos again, steam rising side by side. Sometimes she'd slide mine toward me without looking, already black, already right. And I'd catch myself smiling because it felt like home in a way I hadn't expected. One morning, I came down at 8:47 exactly. She was at the table, newspaper folded, pen resting against the margin where she'd been solving the crossword. You're late, she said. I checked the clock. By 13 minutes. By ritual, she corrected, sipping her coffee. I laughed, sat down. It wasn't about the time, and we both knew it. It was about how the days began to belong to us, in small, unspoken ways. The bench came back, too. On Sundays, if the weather allowed, we'd walk. Sometimes we sat. Sometimes we didn't. The memory of that first near confession still lingered, but now there was no edge to it. Just a kind of relief, like we had carried it through and found a softer place to set it down. Once, I asked her if she ever thought about what people might say. Every day, she admitted. Then she touched my sleeve, steady this time. But it doesn't matter as much as it used to. I didn't push for more. I didn't need to. The truth was already there, quiet but steady, the way rain sounds when you're indoors. Background, constant, oddly comforting. Her daughter came home for a week that summer. I kept my distance, gave space. It wasn't easy, but when she left again, I found her mother on the porch, watching the street, expression unreadable. I sat beside her without speaking. After a while, she leaned her head against my shoulder. Just for a moment. That was enough. Life didn't turn cinematic. We still argued over small things. The thermostat, how long laundry should sit in the dryer. She still had days when grief caught her off guard, and I still had nights when I doubted if I was giving her enough. But somewhere between those doubts, we built something steady. I never heard the faucet drip again. She fixed it once, and that was that. But sometimes, late at night, I'd run the tap just to hear the water flow, to remember the way it all began, with her crouched over the sink, hair falling forward, saying, simple repair. Now it wasn't simple, but it was ours. I don't think there was a single moment when we became together. No line crossed, no sudden declaration. Just a slow gathering of days. The way silence turns into comfort when you stop fighting it. Last night, she asked me if I ever regretted staying. I shook my head. Not once. She gave me that tired, crooked smile, the one that always feels like a reward. Then she reached across the table, brushing her fingers against mine. No hesitation now, no unfinished gesture. And in that small touch, I felt it. Not the rush of first attraction, not the ache of almostness, but the quiet proof of something earned. Something we could hold. Maybe that's all love really is. Not fireworks, not speeches, just the slow, patient act of choosing each other, again and again, until one day you look up and realize you've built a life. And when she poured my coffee this morning, black as always, she didn't need to ask how I liked it. We just smiled, both of us, like we finally understood the same unspoken joke.